Welcome to Hiring Happy Humans, where we talk about all things HR with a variety of folks, from CEOs to community partners, sharing up-to-date trends, best practices, and our wild workplace stories. Each interview is designed to leave you with the knowledge to keep your sanity. I'm your host, Dawn Sipley of Sipley the Best. Thanks for joining in, and let's jump into this week's episode. Welcome back, everyone. Dawn Sipley here with Sipley the Best, and we are hiring happy humans. Today, we have on our show, John Crossman. John and I have been running a little bit in the same circle here in Central Florida for quite some time. I see his name around town a lot, and I reached out to him recently because of the nonprofit that he runs, the Crossman Career Services. Is career...
Close. We'll explain it.
Okay. Yes. Tell me all about it.
Yeah. So I, back in 2019, sold my company. And during that season, both my wife and mom were having some health issues. And then I have they were teenage daughters. Now they're 17, 19. I think that's technically not, they're getting out of that, which is great. So I took this big season off in my life and trying to figure out what was next. I always tell people, I found the end of Netflix, like there's only so much you can do, like just watching the Joe the Tiger guy or whatever that was.
Yeah.
So in that season, I met with Al Weiss, who's a retired CEO of Disney, and I asked him, what advice do you have? And so he referred to me a company called Lee Heck Harris, and they do transitional coaching. So they help former CEOs kind of the next phase.
Okay.
And so I went through this whole big training thing with them. And part of things is like trying to help figure out, do you want to work with private equity? Do you want to be an adjunct professor? Do you want to be an infill CEO? Some people do that and they just get plopped in. So going through all that, one of the things that came out was they give a book on you, like, here you go, Dawn, this is who you are. And they had the top 4 occupations for me. And let me pause and say this. They told me I should never retire. Like, some people are not meant for retirement. Apparently,
retirement's not biblical either, is it?
I don't think that is, So I drew the "you're not retiring" card, and then they said the top 4 occupations. Number 4 was counselor. Number 3 was politician. Number 2 was real estate executive, and number 1 was pastor. And so I was like, I'm going to do that. And all of that. And so I have a company called Crossman Services, and that's my real estate investment company. We buy and develop properties. That's how you know that. And then I have Crossman Career Builders. It's technically still a for-profit company. It just doesn't make a profit because it's out there to help people do things. I do have a nonprofit called the Crossman Foundation,
Okay.
But I haven't done much with that. And the reason why is, most of the time when if I'm talking to somebody who says, hey, John, I want to give away money to help, I direct them to other foundations. I'm trying to get, I try to encourage people to give. Right. I don't really want them giving to me. The exception would be is that I have some consultants that work with me. And so if you called me and you're like, hey, John, I want you to do a DEI presentation. Well, I have people on my team that you could use and I want them paid. I don't want me paid. So I would do that.
Okay.
But I like the Crossman Career brand because it gives me a platform. So my book's underneath that. I have 11 endowed scholarships at 7 universities. And then I have, all the other things I do push through that, which gives me a national platform for that.
Right. I love that. That's all. Yeah. How did your wife feel about the non-retirement Crossman plan?
Well, it's funny. She was ill. And so she needed me around, at some level. And when you're being a healthcare advocate, you really got to be able to listen well. And I'm not a medical person. And so there was a lot of note taking and then trying to understand meds and things like that. But one of my things my wife said to me at one point is she said, John, you don't have to be around here all the time, which is a nice way of saying,
yes, go.
Yeah. And but it was good. It was a wonderful season. And she obviously, for a huge chunk of our marriage, took the brunt of carting our daughters around and doing stuff. And then there was a season where I did a lot of that. And I joke about there's a truth to it. I did not change that many diapers. And it's not that I'm against changing diapers. It's that my wife was like, on it. I mean, she just
Right.
was always like on it, on it, on it. And so, it was good for me to have a very proactive parental role for a season.
Yes.
But, I think that we're both kind of quirky. We both don't fit into normal patterns. My wife was an actress before we had kids. And so,
Okay.
yeah. And so, she has a different way of viewing the world. We had dinner last night and we were both talking about like, we don't fit in normal tranches. And so part of that in life is sort of accepting who you are. And
Mhm.
I'll give you a quick example for me.
Okay.
So think about like a little chart like this, and like
Mhm.
here is the bullseye CEO and here's the bullseye COO. And when the chart came out, I finished like here. And so I
Okay.
was in the CEO box, but like really on the edge. And the
Right.
guy, the consultant that shared that report with me, Don, I could feel that he was scared to say it. Like I think he thought I was going to freak out and be like, "Oh no, I'm a great." And I actually felt kind of relieved. Like I'm not that traditional guy. And
Mhm.
so one of the things that came out was I am really good at the implementation of innovation, which means
Uh,
I'm good when you need change. Like, so how in the world did I end up being the 2-year chairman of the FAMU College of Law when I not black and didn't go to law school? But what happened was is they needed change, and I'm really comfortable for change, right?
right.
And I'm a quirky guy. I like doing business and I like doing community service, and I need to be who God's called me to be. And sometimes my career time, I've had people be like, John, you're out there too much. You're doing too much of that. And I don't, it's not that I want to reject counsel. At the same time, some people I just don't need to be friends with anymore. It's like, guys, this is who I am. And I'm going to be out there and I'm going to be helping historically black colleges and I'm going to help service and community. And I still love prison ministry. Like, if
Right.
you just don't like that, just go be friends with somebody else who likes whatever you like. I'm not judging you, but
Right.
I've got to be who I'm called to be. And I
Yeah.
don't fit in a normal box. And I'm not going
Mhm.
to try anymore. Okay.
Mhm.
I'm going to be this guy.
Now, share with me about the prison ministry, because that's not something that I knew about you. I go into Seminole County jails and I speak to the ladies over there about how they can get jobs when they
Oh,
get
it's
out, because
awesome.
a lot of them feel that label, and the hustle is real. And so I go in there on a biweekly basis and speak to them about what that looks like. So I'd love to learn more.
Yeah, I did a Good News Jail and Prison Ministry for about 10 years
Oh,
and
cool.
did all kinds of ways you can, think about doing that stuff. In fact, I was thinking the other day, I had dinner with Murph the Surf one time, who or movies come out about him. But it's just one of those things. I did a lot of public speaking and advocating for it. And I don't do as much. My role is kind of smaller now,
Right.
but that's just I'm busy with other stuff. But it's a place I would quickly move back to. What's funny, Dawn, is I had this presentation I used to do at churches, and it was about the importance of prison ministry. And I would talk about other issues like homelessness and stuff like that.
Right.
And I would always tell my wife, I'm like, gosh, half the time I do it, literally, I get a standing ovation. And the other half the time, I think they want to kill me. And my wife's like, come on. And so she came with me one time and she said to me after, she's like, I think they really wanted to hurt you. And it's just so weird because all I was doing was would read scripture. It's like, well, what does the
Right.
Bible say? What does the Bible say about prison? Well, we know that Joseph in Genesis was in
Mhm.
jail and he
Mhm.
was telling people, don't forget about me, and they forgot about him. We know that Moses committed murder and
Mhm.
completely got away with it, never got arrested. David had somebody or Uriah had him bumped off, got away with it. You have the apostle Paul who did all those terrible things.
It's a
And
shady
he
book.
himself, Paul said, you need to treat people in prison as if you're chained next to them. And then we have Jesus. Jesus said that when you visit people in prison, you're visiting me. So, my frontal lobe as a person of faith, I'm like, prison ministry is part of it. But
Right.
man, I meet people that love Jesus and you say prison ministry, and it's like
Yeah. There's
they
a
they
stigma
they don't
around it.
like it.
Yeah, yeah, but there's a lot of bleeding hearts for the puppies and the babies but for prison ministry or even rehabilitation around addiction and unfortunately a lot of addiction comes from mental health crisis that are
Right.
just going untreated. So it's always just because they're all connected at the end
Yeah.
of the day in our
Well,
society.
Don, look at this behind me. Yeah, I'm gonna read it because it's backwards. See that? Do you see this right here?
Hope, love,
Yeah.
heal.
Yeah. And so that's a artist did that for me that we had on display at the suicide prevention walk.
Mm.
And so that was a big part of it. But I'm a big person. I believe in reconciliation. I believe in redemption. And
Yeah.
I've seen people in prison have so many good things happen and their lives get turned around. But Mian Kampf got written in prison too, right? So we know that great evil and great good can happen there. And I'm just an advocate for it. I'm an advocate for people who are in transition. I always talk about it. Leaders need to be relevant at a point of crisis. And whether we're business leaders or we're faith-based leaders, it's like being relevant at crisis. And the funniest thing in our world today is, just to say something about me, Don, I am super conservative. Like sometimes people think, oh, you're more moderate or you're independent. I'm like, no, dude, like I don't know how to tell you just how conservative, physically, socially, I'm very conservative.
Mhm.
I also have a really big heart, and my heart comes from my faith in Christ. Like I'm just, that's where I'm at.
Yes.
And so in this world we live in right now is so strange because the woke movement, I don't have any connection to. I do all this work with Black colleges. I don't bump into the woke world. And I don't really bump into the anti-woke world. It's like those two groups are fighting like at whatever. And
There's
I'm
such a
just down here
small
keep doing my
population
thing.
though,
Yeah.
each side,
Yeah.
that loudness.
Neither help me. I'm out here trying to help people in trouble. And I'll partner with anybody who wants to help. I'll partner with people who have a different belief system as long as they really want to make impact.
Mhm. Mhm. What do you think is a change that you would like to see in the judicial system? Because it's obviously broken. What is there one big area that you've identified, having done work there so much, that you think could change how it works?
I think that it's the concept, you have a concept that's like, let's punish, like somebody does something wrong and let's punish them so strongly they don't want to do it again. There's that. And then there's the concept of like, let's reform, let's help this person learn the skill sets they need to be. And I think our current system is kind of been stuck in like a neutral, not doing anything. And I think we have to do a better job of embracing community. Communities need to do a better job embracing their prison systems and the criminal justice system and really trying to bring in some real world solutions to them. There are some people that should never leave prison. There are some people that are so damaged and so broken that they can't function and that's where they need to be.
Right.
But that doesn't mean they still can't be a productive at some level. Sorry, some can't, but there could be some. But there are many, many others. The stats are something like 80% of all people incarcerated in the next 4 years will get out of prison. And in 4 years after that, 90% will be back in jail, right? So you talked about that pattern behavior.
Right.
The only thing that I've ever seen statistically that's broken that is people that go, and while they're incarcerated, go through a prison ministry like what you were referencing to. Because when they get to that understanding the importance of that they're loved and who they are, their life has meaning, and then they start making some really healthy changes. And some of those are maturity, and like I would define maturity is like learning self-control. Somebody cuts you off in traffic, you can let it go. Or if you're in a relationship with somebody and they say something very disrespectful, it doesn't mean you need to hit them. There's learning self-control, personal responsibility, and then choosing where you put yourself. Like where you're gonna, the places you're gonna put yourself to. I'm gonna choose to go to an AA meeting because that's gonna help me. I'm gonna choose to take a financial literacy course. I'm gonna choose to take a parenting course, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot I just said within that. I visited someone in prison 2 years ago at Coleman. It was actually a former member of Congress. And I saw so many women parenting and grandparenting from prison. And I met woman after woman that I thought, this is ridiculous. I'll give you an example. I was visiting this former member of Congress in prison. I met two women who were doctors who committed a crime, nonviolent, first-time offender, and were in for some really crazy period of time. And I was thinking to myself, how in the world would we not put them on house arrest? And instead of having them in prison, then put them as they have to work for the VA for free. right?
Right.
These are medical doctors
Right.
that are
All
in
that
prison.
talent, all that education.
What do we, I don't know what we're doing here. Like there was so much of that I
Mhm.
think trying to think through better ways, better ways to deal with all that. So that's a lot, but
Yeah.
it definitely takes more time and investment.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't understand that transitional crisis as well. I think many people get out with perfectly good intentions, but I know for me, having grown up in poverty and having drug addicts as parents, when I finally got to make my own choices, I didn't feel comfortable in normal rooms. I was
Mhm.
very used to a toxic, weird kind of environment. And I really had to push myself to say, I know I don't want that life, but I should choose friends that maybe think, act, talk, dress, walk a little bit different than kind of what I'm comfortable with. And I've been very open about my imposter syndrome. I think you and I had met GW on the same night when he had come to town for a local fundraiser here in Orlando. And I've got that amazing, picture with him, and I'm standing there and he's promising not to bite me. And I'm like, how did the homeless girl from Central Florida end up in the same room as the president? Like it is just wild. And it's only from my audacity and fearlessness that gets me into those rooms. I'm just so lucky that I met Christ. And like you said, Christ can kind of reform who you are. And I found my worthiness. I found my value and all of those things in him. But the transition is hard. The financial obstacles against people getting employment, for me being an HR professional, I do background checks and drug tests for a living. There's lots of people that walk among us with have interesting backgrounds that you would never know. Everyone knows a murderer. Everyone, I have friends that are very close to me, that are dear to me, that have taken someone's life by poor decisions that they've made. And I think most of society doesn't get that. And then how hard employability is, which leads to a housing crisis, which, it just kind of, cycles into depression and everything else. So with you having your strong real estate background, what are your thoughts on the housing crisis and affordability and things like that, with you having a heart for that population? Do you see a vision of solutions in the future?
I do. I also sit on Orlando Housing Authority Board.
Well,
So there's that. What I would tell you, I'm really fascinated. We are very blessed in our community, Central Florida, and Sanford's part of the Orlando Housing. They do work there too. Our leadership team, I can't tell how extremely impressed I am with them. And what you have to know is that team is spending money from U.S. Congress. And when I was sworn in on that board, I had to do the same oath, that members of Congress do, that I have to defend this nation. That's sort of a, overwhelming, kind of awesome kind of moment. And when you realize that staff, that's what they're doing, you realize how serious this is. And so they are bureaucratic, and they are very different from me, the way they view the world and how they run their day. I have a hard time understanding. It's just not my world.
Right.
And they're so good at it, right? At the same time, they know they need people like me. We need more entrepreneurs, right? So we need both. And so if we're going to say, how are we going to fix it? We're going to fix it through capitalism and good, solid people working for the government who are really detailed people. And we're going to have a healthy tension and balance to do that. That's what that takes. My office is right by Eatonville, and I drive in Eatonville kind of frequently. I do some work with the Boys and Girls Club there. And I'm just amazed how many times I drive in, there's just like dilapidated homes. The site's great, but the house is unlivable. And we've got to figure this out. I actually was with the Secretary of HUD not that long ago, and we're having this conversation about how it's regulations are the problem. It's like, we need regulations, but they're so strict and so cumbersome. We haven't cracked the code of how to help. I'm not a residential housing developer, so I'm not talking about myself, but how do we help those people who do that work be able to do the work profitably? Right. And profitability is a good thing because it motivates people to do the things the right way, for the most part. So I'm hopeful about it, but man, we got to keep working really, really hard on it because it
Yeah.
is not easy. And I worry about the underemployed. I mean, I always, when I get my head, I get worried about as a school teacher and the cop, who are a
Right.
good part of the core middle of our community, and can they afford decent housing? Like when they can't, we're gonna have a problem.
Right.
So we have got to keep finding creative ways to get this fixed.
Yeah. Having grown up with the economic status that I was in, I always lived in some of those super gross, dilapidated. There's one home that I lived in that no one ever lived in again. They demolished it after we moved out. That's
Wow.
how bad
It's
it
like
was.
Jenny's house from Forrest Gump.
It
They
was
mowed it down.
rough, you know.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I always said, if I grow up and I make it, I want to be able to be a landlord, and I'm going to have clean houses that are super cheap, because we lived in those conditions because that's what we could afford. And I am all about capitalism. I don't want the government telling us, you know, what to do, but those homes shouldn't have been rented in those conditions. That shouldn't have been allowed. And so, you know, I've got one property, you know, rental property that I have, and I took a family out of homelessness and put them in it. And they've been in there a few years. The affordability has been hard for them. I have them on weekly payments. This is what we're talking about. Like, I am just like determined to get this family out of it. But, you know, in light of having to possibly consider an eviction with them because they continue to struggle. And at this point, I feel like they're kind of taking advantage of the opportunity. They're about $600 a month below market value. Ooh. And the excuses are always, you know, so it's been a challenge, and it's absolutely broken my heart. Absolutely. So I'm like, I can't be a landlord anymore. I can't do this eviction. It's killing me. And so I started looking at transitional housing. Like, maybe I could buy a house and then partner with a nonprofit that can help folks who are either getting out of prison or out of jail, and then they can manage it, right? I have a business to business relationship. I'm not trained classically in this. I have my own business. I'm not interested in doing really property management, but just with it being one little house, it's kind of been what I did. But when I was talking to a nonprofit here recently, she was talking about the Orange County regulations. So she was seeing me as a solution, being a private owner, partnering with her nonprofit, because she said there was a bunch of regulatory red tape for her as a nonprofit to buy transitional housing or to make a home a transitional house. So I wish more private equity, more private investors would get into the business of doing things like that, because it can make change. The Airbnb market just crushed our local inventory, because so many landlords went from traditional rentals to the Airbnb market, taking them, you know, all those homes off the market. So,
well, you know, I think one of the funny things in our society today is people defining who the enemy is. And I just had a meeting the other day with Congressman Maxwell Frost, who's a progressive Democrat. He's self-described youngest member of Congress ever. And here I am, like, old man, grumpy old man, you know, white, Republican, conservative. We had a delightful meeting. Meeting. Of course we did. Right. You know, it's totally delightful. But one of the things I said to him is like, man, please do all you can to keep people from saying all Republicans are racist. Like, I'm raising money to help students in Black colleges, and most of the donors I meet are white Republicans, and calling them names is not helping me. Right now, you know, in the same vein, and I said this to him, I said, you know, a Republican saying no Democrats are patriots, that's wrong too, guys. Like, the name calling stuff on every angle has got to stop, right? Yeah. I'm totally comfortable disagreeing with somebody on policy and having lunch with them, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I posted on social media about having the meeting with Congressman Frost, and somebody on LinkedIn started pounding on me that I should have said something to him about the Grammys. What? Like, what if why would I don't even, you know, I can't deal with that anymore. We have to get focused on having healthy dialogue. So when you're asking about the housing thing, like, what's the solution? We have to be able to get, you know, entrepreneurs, business people who are probably conservative, probably Republicans, to the table and be treated with respect and dignity, and have people who are probably Democrats and probably more on the progressive side who are working for government. And they can't view each other as the enemy. They have to view each other like, you're on the same team.
Right.
and both adds value. We both are important. You're talking about happy employees, right? Like, look, I'm sure in your world, like if you're dealing with salespeople and they're happy, they're gregarious, they're doing stuff. If they're in accounting and they're happy, they're looking at a screen. I've got my guy here that's operations, and he always jokes like, I don't want to talk to any people, John, and I want to talk to people all day long, right? So
Right.
to be happy employees, happy is going to be defined differently based on the employee, and to have healthy teams, we have those dynamics. It's the same thing in leadership and government. We need that too. And if it's always just about everybody agreeing with each other, well, that's not happy or healthy.
Right. Now, when I went through your LinkedIn, you have a great number of recommendations. It's always the first thing I do when I stalk someone on LinkedIn. Every single one spoke about your leadership skills.
That's nice. I didn't know that.
And so there was definitely a theme, right? Where do you think you derive your leadership skills? Is it because you're a disciple of Christ? Is it because you went to a really great college? Did you have a mentor that really was exemplary? I always love to hear where people get that from, because the people that were remarking on your LinkedIn were of all backgrounds.
Well, that's all ridiculous. Okay, so let me start with that. It's very kind of you to say that, and kind of you to stalk me in said way. I think that there's a lot of ways people can define leadership. And,
Right.
If you're on a football team and you're a very quiet person, but you score lots of touchdowns, they're like, well, that person's a leader, right? Or if you're on a sales team and you call a sales are a leader, and you can be a leader because you're like the loudest person, right? And you can be a leader because you're an innovator, right? Things like that. So I read a book years ago, and it was called Lead Like Christ. And one of the coolest things about that book, it was talking about what things do you experience as a leader? Do you ever feel lonely? Do you ever feel frustrated? Do you ever feel exhausted? And then it went through scripture and how Jesus was very frustrated as a leader sometimes. He was exhausted sometimes. Right? And so really connecting. And in that process, one of the things it did was define a leader. And it said, you're a leader if you're seeking to influence others. So if you're a mom, you're a leader. If you're a coach, you're a leader, teacher, leader. Yeah. And I got asked by a Fortune 500 company one time in a pitch, and my company was very small. And they said, do you consider you to be a leader in the industry? And I said, by that definition, I consider myself to be a leader because I am seeking to influence a process. There's things I'm doing that are not simply trying to make money for my company. I'm trying to change the game, right? Now, I think your question was really, where does that come from? It's totally about my faith. I mean, there's a big part of that why is, my dad was a pastor and civil rights leader. And so I grew up in a way, and that influenced me. I had somebody the other day call me, and we were dealing with some big crisis kind of thing. And it had to do with the work I do with Black colleges. And this person, they happen to be Black. And at the end of the conversation, they said, can I ask you a question, a personal question? I said, sure. And she said, why don't you just like quit? Like, why don't you just walk away? Like, you're white, you just walk away. Like, why don't you just do that? Like, that seems like a lot easier path. And the question caught me off guard, but I was like, well, I feel called to do this. I mean, like, I have a skill set, I have an opportunity. Like, I don't know, it's my faith. So I don't, I don't wear a crown, I wear an apron, right? Like in my head, I'm not like this, like I'm trying to do this with my apron on, and that's really where my head goes when I think about it. I will tell you this, Don, this makes me happy and sad at the same time. I'm a member of the, well, I won't say it. I go to a restaurant frequently, okay? And the manager there told me that the staff fights to serve my table. And it's not because I tip well, although I certainly strive to tip well, but they said I'm the nicest to the staff. And I'm glad. I desire to be very kind to the staff. And it makes me sad that there must be some super high volume of people that treat the staff poorly. My oldest daughter is in college now, and she called me after being away from home for a while and said, Dad, you're really nice to working people. She's like, not everybody's nice to working people. You're nice to working people. And I said, well, we come from working people.
Right.
We're Crossmans are blue collar people since the dawn of man. We're working people. And I think it's really important to treat working people with respect and dignity. And So it always comes back to your worldview. And I've been appointed 4 times politically, and twice by Republicans and twice by Democrats. And I'm really glad. I'm glad the Democrats, who know I'm super conservative, appointed me, because I think they know I care, and I'm really
Right.
trying to help. Right. And
Yeah.
that's who I want to be. My listen, aside from Jesus, my biggest person from the Bible that I connect to is Old Testament Joseph.
Mm.
Old Testament Joseph had big dreams,
Hmm.
and he probably talked too much. I probably talked too much. And his siblings wanted to kill him. And I think that's true of mine as well. They don't know that they always really like me. But he stayed focused. And even through the tough times, he stayed focused on what the big visions were. And when you read about Joseph's funeral, he was a Jew living in Egypt, and his family was there, and the Egyptians were there. And I hope when I'm at my funeral, I hope there's wonderful Christians there that love me and love Jesus and talk about that. And I hope that people come that don't know Jesus at all. I hope that people come of different faiths, because they know I loved them and I knew that I cared about them.
Yeah.
Now, Dawn, the funniest thing in my life today, the people that seem to get the most angry at me are the people that don't feel like I hate the people they hate enough. Right? Like
The
people,
loudest boos come from the chiefest seats, though.
right. Like they want me to hate you. You don't hate the anti-Trump people enough. You don't hate the Trump people or the anti-Trump. You don't hate them enough.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
nice. You're appeasing. You're appeasing to, you're talking to these people, or you met with Congressman Frost. You're appeasing because you're going on the other side of the aisle. It's like, bro,
It's relationship.
it's called kindness.
Right.
You know why I'm kind, Dawn? Because God's kind to me.
Yeah.
Gentle, good, patient, loving, generous.
Right.
These are when I think about in my head, in my perfect world, if somebody met you and they said, "Oh, you had John Crossman on your show. Tell me about John. What's John like?"
Right.
What I would want you to say is, "Well, he's really kind, and he's good, and he's generous, and he's loving," right?
Mm.
And if you read that in Galatians, the fruits of the Spirit, you also can read the opposites,
Yes.
vengeful, right? All these other terrible things. That's
Right.
the opposite.
Yeah.
And so kindness gets this bad rap with some people. And I'm like, guys, kindness comes from God. God is kind.
Mm.
If God was vengeful,
We'd
John
all be in
Crossman would
trouble.
be in a world of hurt,
Amen.
right?
Why do you think most employers struggle with that basic kindness? I can't imagine a world where people are just mean out of spite. Do you think it's fear? Do you
That's
think
fear.
it's ego? Why can't bosses just be nicer? Like how do the good stand out so bright?
Well, I think that people are broken, Don. Some of your childhood, some of my childhood. I grew up in some blue collar, rougher areas, and I left. I wanted to get out of that. It was a harsh environment.
Yeah.
The thing this is going to sound odd, and I don't want this to, not for 1 second. I don't want this to sound any way disrespectful to the suffering you had.
Mm.
The thing that could have value in what you went through is you were aware that it was bad. Like,
right.
You are aware this is not right. Imagine, if you will, the child that's growing up in Isleworth or some Alaqua or some wealthy area, and yet the parents don't pay attention to them. They don't love them.
Right.
And so what happens is that child is really hurting, but they don't know why, right? They don't. So then it comes out in this odd way. Like, I'm always like, how do these rich kids do drugs? Like, why would you be doing a drug? Why would you want to medically alter how you feel when you have everything you need?
Right.
And the reality is they don't have everything they need. Does that make sense?
It does.
And so, I think that I just always come back to a lot of times, it's a spectrum of things, but there's mental health issues, there's addiction issues, and then there's oftentimes deeper wounded issues. And when you see somebody, when you look at my LinkedIn profile, okay, and you really dive into it, and you might say, wow, this John Crossman guy, he's really successful. I want you to understand that maybe, but you're also looking at a profile that you're looking at a really broken person. And when I went through a recovery myself, and when I had to learn for that was, I think my addiction was success, meaning I would try to get another promotion or another big deal done instead of feeling the pain or loss or trauma from my childhood. As
Right.
I got healthier, here's the thing, I became less successful. I mean, I made less money because I didn't have that itchiness. So why does somebody end up in my chair? Why does somebody up in your chair?
Right.
Like, why does somebody end up
Right.
as CEO or a boss? How does somebody become a boss? Well, sometimes they become a boss because they're itchy, because they're traumatized and they're overcompensating. Does that make
Mhm.
sense? And so that doesn't in any way legitimate any kind of poor behavior, but I'm trying to answer the question and giving context to why that can be.
Yeah. I just started writing my book. I
Oh, good
have
for
long
you.
been told to write a book. And I've always said I have nothing new to say that someone else hasn't already said, probably better.
Right.
And, you know, but it came to me, and what my book is about is how trauma, neglect, and abuse can form you as a leader, just for the
Yeah.
exact reasons that you
Yeah.
said. And much of my success, I was just running away from something and staying busy, right?
Yeah.
You know, I've never watched a lot of television. I don't get a lot of jokes because I don't know pop culture, because I was addicted to my work and to the next deal and to the security that money brought me, because I never wanted to be dependent on anyone to pay my bills and have to do the things that our family had done when I was younger. So I, yeah, I mean, that's exactly what my book is about, is, and then it'll talk about some of the drawbacks too, right? We can also form some bad habits around all of that. It's not all healing and sunshine, but parentification of children, if you look at the leaders in the high level leaders, oftentimes they experience that as a child in one form or another.
For sure. And good for you for writing the book, by the way, Dawn. That's really exciting.
I
I'm excited for you.
just started, and I found it to be quite an emotional experience, because a lot of it is going to be, you know, sharing my childhood stories. But what I want it to be as well is I'm going to ask for others to contribute, because I don't want it to be just a story about childhood, you know, addiction, you know, parental addiction and whatnot, but the young man whose parents divorced, and the mother says, well, you're now the man of the house, and he has to level up as an 8-year-old to a man's stature. Or the mom that gets, you know, critically ill, and the children become caretakers to the parent. Or someone has Alzheimer's and the child, you know, so it's not just parentification or adultification doesn't just happen from one thing. And I really want my book to be appealing to a wide variety of folks, because I think, you know, we as a society are falling away from the church, from relationship to Christ and things like that. And as you said, there's so much woundedness, and you can't heal the woundedness and understand it until you know what the root of it is. And much of our career successes and failures, you can tie back to childhood experiences and expectations and things like that. So
Sure.
I'm looking forward to seeing what all the research brings out. My baby sister, it's really funny. We're very polar opposite. She's progressive and as liberal as can be. You know, we're the polar opposite on the spectrum with things, but she's going into social work. She just got accepted into UNC. And is
Good.
going to be getting her master's in social work. And so
Wonderful. That's
I'll be
wonderful.
I'll be having her contribute to really do some deep dive case studies on where these leaders emerge in the community that have had these different life experiences. So
And can I just say real quick that, well, I probably disagree with your sister maybe 100% of times on policy issues. I 100% get where from your background she could be in that place. And I have such compassion
yeah,
because, you know, when somebody has like system failure, the family
right,
failed, the church failed,
right.
and they cling to, you know, the government, and they kind of say
Mhm.
like I hear you, like, and I'm not
Yes.
mad at that person, I'm compassionate
No.
at that person. And we can disagree on policy and have compassion, you know.
Oh.
Anyway, good for you for writing the book, and good for you for sharing your truth. That's wonderful. I love that.
What was your book writing process like? How long did it take you?
Well, Dawn,
I ask that question a lot now that I've dove into it, and it's very interesting, the answers that I get.
Well, keep this in mind that I'm dyslexic. Okay. So
okay.
I have some different challenges. So my path was not a normal path.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always done a lot of public speaking,
Mm-hmm.
and I've done a lot about real estate and careers in real estate. The history of shopping centers are some of my gems of the I hope of speaking. So one time I was driving to the University of Florida, and I started thinking about these kids, and they're all ridiculous, and they've never made a B in their whole life. Like I barely ever made a B in my whole life. You know, these kids on the other end. And I started thinking about, like, gosh, 10 years from now, and we're all 31 or whatever they are, they should just be killing it. But in my life and experience, some of those kids will be killing it, and some will be dead, some will be in jail, some will be a little addicted to drugs, and thrice divorced or something. And I'm not trying to judge anyone. I'm just saying things that aren't in the playbook. So I wrote this speech called The Top 5 Ways to Get Fired and the Top 5 Ways to Keep from Being Fired. And when I wrote that speech, I didn't write about like being late or dressing inappropriately. I was really trying to dive into what is the thing, it's like, man, what the heck happened to Bill O'Reilly, right? Or another, expect Kate Spade. I mean, Kate Spade, what woman wouldn't want to be Kate Spade, and she killed herself? I mean, Anthony Bourdain, I could go on and on and on. I mean, we get Robin Williams, you and I could name hundreds of people, and you're just like, how does these insane thing happens? So I wrote that speech, and that speech became my most requested speech. People that used to invite me for business lectures would say, do that speech. And I gave it one time, I gave it at Full Sail, and the Q&A, I spoke for 45 minutes. The Q&A went 45 minutes. I was finally said to these kids, I got to sit down. It was just like so much. So that's where I knew I had a book.
Right.
To answer your question, the process took about 4 years, and how I really finally got it done was I had to have a ghostwriter.
Right.
And the thing with the ghostwriter was I needed the book to sound like me. And so what I finally started doing was I would record the chapters. I would just record myself, chapter 8, and I would talk about it, and then I would send it to him, and then he'd make it sound
okay.
Right.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah. I think I'll write probably about 80% of mine, but like you, I'm not a writer. That's, and so to structure it and stuff, I think I'll have a ghostwriter finish it off for me. But it's been therapeutic for me to do the work of writing it. But I love the audio.
Can I give you one piece of advice on all that?
Please.
When the book is totally done, like when you're like, John, it's done.
Mm-hmm.
Before you go to an editor or before you go to publish it or whatever you're going to do, read the entire book out loud and read it to somebody. Like, get a friend and have them sit there. I'm going to read this to you.
Here we go.
Because reading it aloud, that's the final best edit you're ever going to do. Like, hire a third-party editor to clean it up for sure.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm telling you, I've got 2 more books on deck. I don't know that I'll ever get done. But if I ever get either of them done, that will definitely be like my final edit. Because I do think there's an audio version of my book.
Okay.
And when I did the audio version, that's where I got that. There was just a couple little final tweaks where I was like, when I did the audio, I actually just tweaked it slightly when I did it, because I was like, oh man, like this is just a tiny bit off. But that really helped me.
Okay. Awesome. So I always love to ask my guests one question at the end of the podcast. And that is, if you could tell your young professional self just one piece of advice, what would you tell yourself knowing what you know now?
One thing to tell the young professional self.
Yes.
Just one. I think it would be where my brain goes is trying to be balanced, like a balance. Like, I ran track in college, and so I've gone through seasons where I've gotten great shape and out of shape, whatever, and trying to be more balanced and
consistent.
Rest, And then I think the second thing would be is being mindful of what skill sets I need to add. I think I actually done a decent job of that. I will tell you a story for another day, but as in my late 40s, I learned how to cry, right? I had to learn how to onboard some emotions that I'd shut off deep inside, kind of stuff. So I think trying to onboard, look, I'm heading into being a empty nester, and like that's a whole, I don't know, I never experienced
It's a
that
whole
before.
thing. My
The whole thing.
19-year-old just left, and I had heard about it, but I didn't realize.
Yeah. So I just think that, I guess, balance and, being open to what the next season is, and taking coaching. And I don't know how I would say this to my younger self, but I said it earlier, is that I had to come to peace with my own quirkiness. I don't fit in well at churches. I mean, I'll tell you that. Like I have a Friday morning men's group that means the world to me, and I love the Christian faith.
Right.
But me in churches,
The
that's been a heartbreaking. It's hard. And I don't fit in like a traditional corporation stuff too.
Mhm.
Again, not that there aren't great corporations, there are. So that constant trying to be accepting of who they are and accepting who I am, and then trying to, how do I dock where I need to dock? I have to keep working on that. Hope that helps.
It does. It does. Thank you so much for sharing just so genuinely with me today. And I just wish you all the luck. And I hope to see you out there making a difference on all the things that you're passionate about.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Dawn. And good luck to you with your book. That's very exciting.
All right. Thanks, John. Thanks again for spending time with us today. If you want more HR stories and resources, go to simplythebest.com to join our newsletter. That's SIPLEY. Until next time, stay happy.